this is actually a pretty good time for you to fill out the feedback forms, since remember, when you leave the building, you just leave it in the reception. So we actually quite value those, you see. This is one of the rare cases where the organizers of the conference actually read them through by preparing for our next conference, which is once in a year. So this is 9th year in a row. Our next conference is going to be 10th. That means Jubilee. So some of the speakers can already, I think, apply to available positions if they would like to have some speaking. Okay, I will start with you. What we usually do at the very beginning, we just introduce ourselves. Who you are, where you're from, what do you do? What the company does you represent, if it's a company.
Okay. Is this automatic? Yes, it is. Okay. My name is Katrin Nyman Metcalf. I come from Estonia. I don't represent any company as such, but I am an adjunct professor at Tallinn University of Technology, professor of law. I'm head of research for something called the Estonian E-Governance Academy. That basically spreads the word on our Estonian e-governance in the rest of the world. And then I work as a consultant on issues which link law and technology.
Okay, so then I guess you know Siim Sikkut and some of the team that actually is somehow connected with what you call X-Roads and X-Bones and everything.
Exactly, because we go around the world together with, for instance, Siim, because the organization I work for is actually private, it's in the form of an NGO, but we work closely together with the government, so we sort of help the government in explaining what it is we do in Estonia, why it is so good, and what others can learn from it.
Okay, good one. I think I have you second time in a panel.
Yes, absolutely.
Good to see you again.
Here this
good
time
to see you
last
again.
Year. My name is Robert Kennedy. I'm with IBM. Presumably most of you were in the keynote this morning where Mark Ayre was presenting the overall IBM strategy, and we flipped a coin this afternoon and decided that I would come up here for this session. It makes me think a little bit. We're IBM, we're a very large organization, we have a lot of different kinds of solutions, and I was at a similar it was a much smaller conference, security conference, and there was a couple other vendors that did specific things, valuable, and I said, I'm Bob Kennedy, I'm with IBM. At IBM, we do everything in security. And somebody in the audience raised their hand and says, I tell everybody to beware of the vendor that says they do everything. So
it's a nice point, but I mean, you can't neglect the growth of the IBM. I mean, sure. Every decade, IBM can say we are a hardware company, we
sure.
are a software company, we
sure.
are a cloud company. Now you are artificial intelligence company,
sure.
IT security company,
sure.
and God, my opinion changed when I first read that the Watson machine was calculating some enzymes for curing cancer.
Sure.
Now,
sure.
that's something,
sure.
right?
So, well, and we've made a lot of progress with Watson all the way around on health issues and security issues, and you know, it's showing a lot of value around.
I know. There are, of course, some of the stories, especially recently. I don't know if people read some. I use Flipboard mostly for reading international magazines, and obviously there was a talk about the Watson and actually the speed of the penetration of such solutions and technologies into our daily lives, into some fields, technologies, manufacturing, etc. And people kind of, hey, come up. People kind of think it's too slow, not because of the IBM, not because of the machine that is learning, not because, but maybe because some people still don't know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember very clearly, first time I was given an opportunity myself to try Watson out.
Mm-hmm.
So I had some data sets, I had some Excel files, etc. I just fed it in, straight in, just to see what happens, what kind of outcome goes, etc. How do we actually raise this awareness that there are limitless possibilities in the future to use that? I think there is still people don't a little bit afraid to touch that. It's too slow. I mean, it could be big within the last 5 or 6 years. Watson has been out for commercial usage.
Well, I think in some respects, while it seems like a long time, I think this is really very much of an emerging discipline.
This is IT world.
That takes a while before it really bears fruit. IBM has certainly put a lot of energy into Watson for healthcare. And I think everyone is still looking for the real payback on that. And I think that when, I don't know, I'm an American, so everything goes back to baseball. So when we hit a home run with Watson, I think people will know it, and we'll get there. But it takes a while for folks to really understand what it can bring to the table and eventually show its value. None of these systems they're only as good as what they've been input. And Watson and technologies like it are trying to be smarter with that input and be able to consume such large quantities and help companies make better decisions on whatever that is, whether it be cancer or security or anything where there's a lot of data involved. We'll get there.
Yeah, it's basically exactly the thing that machines, they learn by the data we feed them, and they get trained to do what we train them to do.
Absolutely.
And I think Watson is no exception in that sense.
Yeah.
The closer the companies that work in pharmaceuticals, etc., will start to see those opportunities and try to seize them. The faster the better in that sense. Because I don't know if it was previously like 20 years ago or 30 years ago when it was just playing chess, making some headlines, but that's about it.
Sure.
That's a long way up until today when it can calculate some enzymes to fight cancer.
Sure.
I believe that's where the real money is, surely.
Yeah.
But people did really express concerns that it's a little bit too slow, and maybe we are not intelligent yet to know what to do with it.
And as we are within IBM, we want to make progress faster. But if anything, as Mark mentioned, I mean we've been doing business here for well over 100 years, and if there's anything, we're resilient. So we're the right company to take it there.
Okay.
But we have a ways to go. There's no question about it.
Oh, sure.
We'll get there. We'll hit that home run or that triple or double or whatever. We'll get there.
Yeah. It's just international business machines. So in a sense, it is a machine.
Yes.
Okay. We have a new panelist. Please introduce yourself.
Hello. My name is Felipe Pathé Duarte. I'm the late guy. I just arrived right now. I'm sorry because I was outside networking, so it's one of the purposes of this conference. I'm from Lisbon, Portugal. I'm a professor, most of security studies, international relations, geopolitics. But I'm also a consultant for Visionvare, which is a cybersecurity company based in Portugal. We work most on forensic, open source intelligence, and security of information, broadly speaking. And my work, both academic and also as a consultant, is the relation between cybersecurity or technology with warfare. So how warfare change with technology. We have a quite interesting perspective here. And I don't know if you're the first question you asked when I arrived.
I haven't seen you for a year, so
okay, yeah. Thank you. Because normally, if we go to the classical perspective, war never change. So man is the same and war never change, and so man is linked with war, and technology developed with war, from the spear to an airplane or to an aircraft bombing. What I'm saying is that normally, just like one of the main theoretics of war, called von Clausewitz, used to say that war is a sort of a chameleon. The chameleon never changes, but it adapts. There is an adaptation. And the adaptation of warfare depends on technology. But man never change and warfare never change. The point is, right now, things are changing a lot, and probably warfare will change, because the main ideas of space and time are changing with warfare. With new technology, most with cyberspace, the idea of space is different because it's not a strict time, it's not a strict space, it's not a closed space, so it's something that is open and it's rising, so you cannot apply the normal concepts of geopolitics to cyberspace. At the other time, at another perspective, the time is also changing, the idea of time, the perceptions of time, so the chain of command change. So the perspective of warfare is changing. And we have here two very good examples of it. Not only the classic, I'm a little bit, I know I'm using military concepts, the blurred difference between kinetic warfare and information warfare. Until now, there were two separate concepts, but right now they are closed. Information warfare is the same as kinetic warfare, and there is a kinetic effect in information warfare more than ever right now. And another thing, besides those, this changing of the concept, is most the cyberspace per se, and the impact of things that I talked today about how small wars became big wars through cyberspace, using big data, using some type of information, or for instance, using social media or weaponizing social media. And sometimes we don't have that idea, but social media, they are weapons at the same time. Not only from information, but also with a physical, with a physical result, with a kinetic result. And so we need to reflect about it and understand that warfare is coming from other means, and it's more comprehensive than ever. And so we finally conclude that the state and the government which normally is responsible for warfare, for security and defense, is not enough. And so it's crucial to work with companies, it's crucial to establish public-private partnerships because the state is not enough. And we have a very good example on this. For instance, the GDPR in Europe, which is for us a normal thing, it's from a philosophical political perspective, is a form of the state assuming that does not have the capability to protect all citizens, which is obligated to do it, and at the same time assuming that data is a strategical and a crucial thing
it's an asset, of
course. And so assuming that does not have the capability, just pull the private companies and individuals to protect themselves. So if you think about GDPR, it's a changing perspective of threats and a changing perspective of the response of the threats. So we can assume warfare using the metaphor of GDPR. Lots of things to say, but I don't want to bother you.
No,
because I think any aspect could have a seminar. So I pass the microphone. Thank you.
Katrin, you wanted to elaborate on the first part.
On a few things, actually, because it's usually these gatherings, there aren't that many people with a legal background. I'm glad to see that it's changing a bit, that there's more interdisciplinarity, not just at universities, but also in the real world, because we're realizing that there are so many things that if we do not talk to one another early enough, things get complicated. They don't have to be. And my message in the session I was speaking in earlier today was that actually, from a legal side, many of these things do not have to be complicated. It looks like it is very complex, but actually not. We don't need lots of new laws and rules and so. But what you were saying about warfare, and so that raised many of these questions where it is really essential to think also from a legal and international legal perspective, because exactly like you were alluding to, there's been for years and years, for centuries, we've had these principles of distinction where you knew what was military and what was civilian, for instance. And that is impossible now with technology, because now you can sit with your laptop somewhere and do acts of war. So it's no longer possible to use the kind of terminology that was there before. And also, your final point there, we have, and this is not just for warfare, but maybe this is the most striking place we can see it. It's the role of private companies. That we have private companies that are so important that we've actually never had anything like that before. It's not that private companies haven't been important, and if you take from a legal area, for instance, the whole concept of competition law grew out of the situation of the railways in the United States as sort of some nearly 200 years ago. But still, there was never one company that had the kind of impact that now companies like Google, for instance, do, that they can decide so many things. So this is something which, from the legal perspective, and just now talking of applying a law or even applying GDPR, but generally the way we think, because the way one makes rules or tries to make companies abide by rules, it's a whole other thing than the way you do it when it's states. And warfare there is a good example, because before, yes, for a long time we've had laws for private companies. We've had ways of influencing them through licensing and other such decisions to keep them doing what they should and not doing the bad things. But their impact was the lesser. The really big impact in things like warfare and so would come from the state actors. And that is no longer true. And I think in many ways, for also the legal community in a broad sense, this is actually a bigger change than the technology as such, because that is more easy to adapt to. But whole new players, even things like who are going to make rules. I mean, if laws cannot apply because it's so easy to avoid the jurisdiction by moving to another country, maybe we need something else, and maybe we need the private sector, we need this multi-stakeholderism, but that until now has not been particularly effective, because the good guys make rules and stick by them and the bad guys couldn't care less. So it's something that it definitely has turned a lot of things upside down, where technology was the push factor, but it is not really the key for these changes.
Yeah, it's actually a good point. If you mentioned GDPR, and in my opinion, this was a huge surprise for many, in a sense that, you know, European Union and Commission, especially regarding law, they go small steps, and it's usually politics, and there are so many compromises, etc., etc. So GDPR, in that sense, it was huge. I mean, it was not a small step. It was like, okay, let's bring a whole elephant at once, not piece by piece. So in that sense, it could be some sort of a warfare. Now we are experiencing attacks, people's data can be breached, there is no responsibility, it happens too often, etc., etc. We have to protect our citizens. You mentioned the case, most of the companies, people trust their data, they're basically American companies in terms of the ICT. And so it's not a problem itself, it was just something the European Union just put on the weight, and it was heavy. It still is, but I think it's still a win-win situation. Look, half a year is gone. Obviously, there are fines, and obviously there are cases, and it's actually not that bad.
I'm not saying. I didn't say that it was a bad thing, not at all.
No, it's part of a warfare, yeah, in that sense.
It was a bad
in the
thing
weight.
in terms that it was a sort of a despair measure. Yeah. So yeah. It was a bad thing because probably it was too late. But even though what I'm saying, what I'm trying to pay attention or call attention for it, is the changing of the paradigm. Because suddenly the responsibility of your security does not rely on the state or the governments, but just rely on private companies. So if you think this in a perspective, in a geopolitical perspective, or in terms of security and defense, or we might say security studies, it's a quite, just like you said, it's a quite interesting, it's an elephant that then suddenly the paradigm change, and it's not about the state from whom normally we expect security and defense. And
but this is much cheaper, you have to admit.
Yeah,
I mean.
yeah, it's the obligation. And that's the changing point. And this is one, for me, a smart response from a different type of threat. We might say there are lots of type of threats and so on, the normal cliches, but thinking about the vulnerabilities of cyberspace, it's amazing. So anytime, every 3 minutes, we just do this gesture to taking a look what is happening in our lives.
Yeah. Making somebody money with your thumb.
I remember that there was a famous sociologist, German Ulrich Beck. He used to say, he developed the risk society theory, which is quite interesting, and you can apply it for technology and cyberspace and cybersecurity. He developed a quite interesting concept, which was in the 90s. Actually, in the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. a changing period. The reflexive modernity, which is, in a quite synthetic way, the more you have technology, of course, the more easy your life is, of course, so it improves your life. But at the same time, you became more reflexive, because with technology, you can improve yourself as a human being, but at the same time, you can see yourself as a human being. It's sort of a mirror effect at the same time. And when you reflect who you are, you just realize who you are and the risks of yourself. And when you have the conscience of the risk, you become more vulnerable. And so it's an idea of perception. Your perception as a human being changed with technology. Another philosopher in the same way, Heidegger, used to say that technology doesn't change man. What does change technology? It's the perspective of man from the perspective of reality, the man's perspective of reality. And so with technology, we have a different perspective of reality, and we have a different sense of our risk and our vulnerability. And so the more reflexive we are, it's a paradox, the more vulnerable we are. Because if I have the idea, if I don't think about the, I don't know, the risks that we have here in the room, I'll be happy.
I honestly, I try
so this
to
is
follow
interesting.
you, but this is the case. It's really hard to gulp this down without, you know, a glass of wine.
No, let me just finish. No, this is, I used to say this to my students. Of course, if you think about the cyberspace, where you became more dependent every time, and it's a growing space, just like universe, it's opening and it's growing. You cannot crystallize the moment, so you became more vulnerable because it punishes you, because at the same time you became more dependent of a thing that you definitely cannot crystallize and understand. And so warfare changed about it. Right now in NATO you have, sometimes you think about the zero phase, where you have different approach of warfare, you have levels of warfare, and right now you are in sort of a level of sort of an information warfare, where data is crucial. So imagine that you are, for instance, in the front line. You are a soldier, or military in front line, and suddenly in your phone you receive a message or a photography of your wife, of your boyfriend, girlfriend, wherever, cheating you. Your behavior will change. Mm-hmm. And so we are vulnerable to that kind of thing, and it's a reflexing thing at the same time.
Okay, good one. I want to stop you here, but you make a good point on how we as subjects are being manipulated, and it can be done by AI, etc. Now, before I move to the next subject, then anybody from the audience wants to ask a question right now before I close this subject and move on to the next one? Somebody is smiling. I love that. Okay, the next subject I wanted to touch, and you basically touched it in a sense that you are representing a university, and you spoke about people from like lawyers and those are getting involved in the process, etc. Now, I want to open a subject regarding the skill set. If we talk not simply about the ICT as a basic producer who produces code by pressing buttons, etc., but in a sense, the skill set. European Union is publishing plenty of reports that we are missing 300,000 to 400,000 ICT specialists every single year. It's always a deficit. There's always shortage of them. The information security officers are in high demand. The problem is that I don't see much of the classifieds searching for them, and B, if I want to become one, what kind of skill set do I need for tomorrow for these issues? Now you're much closer to that teaching learning process. Maybe you have some insights on that.
I think there are a number of different issues, let's not call them problems. One is clearly what you mentioned, just simply that people may be studying the wrong thing, that There probably should be more young people who focus already in a younger age on things like maths, and so that they more easily can perhaps go into technical subjects. So that is one problem that many countries have. Simply, there are certain subjects that, including law, for instance, that are very popular and actually maybe producing too many people. But I would say that's actually a smaller thing. That is just something which probably can be handled by making campaigns explaining what and so. But I think the key thing really in what you're saying, and something that is very important, is this interdisciplinarity, which means that we cannot be stuck in our disciplines, whatever that is. This has been the case already for some time, but not for very, very long. It was quite possible only, say, 20 years ago, maybe, to work on law and know law, really, and be quite specialized only on that. And technology was for technical people, so when we needed to know something about it, we would ask somebody. That really stopped take a very simple example, when you started using word processors rather than asking a secretary to type up things. So already then you had to know certain technology. And so, but that now has gone much, much further, that to even be able to understand certain issues that come up, for instance with data protection, you do need to have a certain sort of technical knowledge. The same way for the technical people. They need to have a certain legal knowledge, because they need to know what is data protection and what kind of data. I mean, data, for instance, it should be classified depending on its nature, not on its form. So it doesn't matter if it's electronic or paper-based. You need to know, is this something that should be publicly accessible or not? And so on. That's not a technical issue. So the problem here is that the educational system, pretty much globally, isn't really acting the way it should. There's a lot of talk about this. Everybody in the university world talks of interdisciplinarity, and then things will happen. If you write an interdisciplinary paper, you will have problems having it published, because the journal that is more IT will say this is too legal, the legal journal will say this is too technical, the philosophical journal will say it's not for us. You will also have things like that you have to have certain sort of projects or something to proceed in your academic career, and they may be focused on your one discipline, so that if you've done something for another faculty, then that doesn't count. Everybody's trying to change this, but it is slow, and I think that is the key to overcoming this problem. You said exactly, you don't see people looking for these individuals they say that they're missing, because they probably don't exactly know what they're looking for. They know what they need, but they don't know this is the person with this exact education, because it actually doesn't matter. Yeah. Because maybe I can do it, maybe you can do it. We have different educational backgrounds, but we have that knowledge we need for something. But I think, though, this is a problem that's going away, because everybody's aware of it. It's just, to say, it's going too slowly, but there is a lot more awareness than only, say, 5 years ago about this.
Yeah, but it's not a problem with specialities as such. I mean, I understand the academia especially is very, very conservative in that sense, and labor market, especially ICT companies, they are demanding specialists that are, you know, not even born yet. Yeah, in that sense, do you feel it is shifting away from the hands of traditional educational system to like self-esteem, self-learning courses, trainings by the very companies that need and seek those specialists, etc., to train exact worker for exact needs they have?
Well, actually, no. I don't really think so. I think we see some of that, but the reason it's not really the future is because we don't see young people wanting to stay in the same job for 50 years. So companies will be a bit wary of making a lot of specialized training. Of course, there will be training. One thing which has changed is also this lifelong learning, which really is a thing that now exists, and everybody, I mean, there are few people in almost no profession that you could just come in and then do your job and never have any more training. So yes, you will have on-the-job trainings and so, but to really educate somebody to something very specific within a company, only to see them go to the competitor next year. That's also not attractive. So this needs to be, I think probably the difference, it will be even more up to the individual, that you will also, even already at your basic university education, perhaps pick topics like from different faculties put together, and not just have the served program that you should do. And then you will be aware of this sort of aspect of this lifelong learning, that then you will have to continue to learn things, whether it is through the company or whether you just take courses, online courses, or other courses.
So we can try to solve that with the lifelong learning. Robert, you represent a company that's changing. There is Watson growing. How do you imagine what kind of people IBM will hire tomorrow?
I don't know, that's a $1 zillion question. I'm not even sure the right way to answer it.
But how do we...
We have the same sorts of challenges as everyone else does.
Data scientists, are there, you know... if artificial intelligence will be in a lot of spheres, and you will need less and less technicians, less and less hardware specialists, etc. So how do you see that portfolio shift?
I think that most of our decisions are relatively tactical. We're trying to address whatever the need is. You know, in security for sure, we see the dearth of people with the right expertise, and so I mean. We at IBM are hiring a lot of younger people, for sure. We call it our summit hires, where we bring people out of school and sort of, we're trying to bring their perspective into a company that's filled with old guys like me that don't have much hair left. But, so we're trying to, you know, because those are the people that are going to be making the buying decisions. I mean, we're pretty tactical. We're just trying to help customers solve their IT problems, whatever that is. And certainly skills is a big aspect of that. And we're going to either help train them, help provide solutions that maybe therefore need less skills, building up the right kind of expertise. I don't think there's a single answer here at all. Yeah, we hire lots of scientists. We hire lots of people that can get their fingers dirty and get in and deploy software products, or we're running a lot of security operations centers around the world. We're taking over the security aspects of a lot of companies. I don't think there's an answer, but we're tactically seeing what the issues are, but trying to stay. You know, people are always going to accuse a 100-plus-year-old company of being staid.
No, it's fine. It's just you know, usually if a company makes good money and is there for 100 years, probably is doing something right. Sure. So probably IBM and probably you are the right persons to ask these questions.
Yeah, sure. All along the way, we try to look at what our customers are trying to get done and try to help them out somehow or another, and make a nickel along the way.
Eventually, it will shift based on market demand.
And clearly, we've made big changes in our organization, just from being a little less dependent on the mainframe a few years ago to where we are now, to the investment we're making in Watson, to the investments we're making in security. Well, we're trying to look for things that we can do that other organizations may be less capable of doing, and our resilience can come into play, and big R&D in lots of areas. So Watson was announced 6 years ago, and it's taken a long time. Well, we spent a whole lot of years building that out before anybody even saw the light of day. So we've got long-term projects going on from that perspective. And we can do that, but still at the end of the day, we have to provide solutions that that hopefully solve customers' problems and that they're willing to pay us a nickel to do. Yeah. So we're gonna stay tactical on a day-to-day basis.
So I was hoping for some crazy answers as well, like machine trainers, like machine coaches.
and we're a big enough organization that we very well may be doing that, but Mr. Robert Kennedy right here is one small cog, and so is not as tuned into that. But yeah, every now and then, folks like Mark and I will have an opportunity to kind of see some of those things, that crazy ideas that IBMers are working on. But I think we're a little closer to the field. We have to be a little bit more realistic about what we can offer today. solve problems.
Okay, thank you. Could you pass the microphone? What do you think? How will a portfolio of a skill set will change within your organization? Will change in regards to international warfare, cyber warfare, etc. So there are workers, there are medics, there are soldiers, and well, shooting is a good skill, but probably there are more.
Yes, I don't know if I will be the best guy to answer your question, but I would like to say first thing concerning about the lack of human resources here in Europe, that they don't have. There is an absence of human resources in terms of cybersecurity. So normally, then I'll go to the other answer. The first is normally you have very good academy on it, but in terms of professional training, it's not very good, and so you have a lack of cybersecurity in terms of it's difficult to recruit. Cybersecurity companies, they have difficult to recruit cybersecurity experts, or they are very good and they'll go to big companies, or they just don't exist instead of a unicorn. And so right now in my company we are having problems to recruit cybersecurity experts.
As we all do. Yeah.
So yeah, so that's a problem. Concerning the future, I don't know, it's difficult. Normally in military terms, the concept of regular warfare does not exist anymore. You have small wars, wars that are conducted by insurgents, which are not at all technological. It's a paradox, because the more technological you have, the more technology you have, sometimes the less sophisticated is warfare.
Yeah, sometimes you need one sharp cut.
Yeah, take for instance, right now the so-called lone wolves, terrorists that attacked in the name of the jihad, they just act with quite unsophisticated methodology. So you have here two branches. The first is the more technology of warfare you have, the less technological, the less unsophisticated could be the attacks. And why? For two reasons. The first is because there are certain types of vulnerabilities that we have, that they explore, and at the same time societies are not ready anymore for certain types of violence. I remember quoting again Edgar Morin, which was a French philosopher, used to say, not talk about barbarism, it's at the same side, open the door for barbarism. What I mean is, we don't have, semantically speaking, the concept of violence by political motivation in our regular and normal life. And so suddenly someone with a knife or with a car, with a non-sophisticated thing, with daily objects, just create some havoc, and they just create easily disruption in the society. So the more technological you are, sometimes the less unsophisticated become the attacks. On the other side, what do you have? You have different type of soldiers which are not ready for for normal and kinetic warfare. For instance, you can, with lots of problems with that, you can do your warfare through drones in some places in the United States, and I'm just kidding, but at 6 o'clock you can have tea with your family. And so you are in the battlefield, but you are not. So there is a gamification of warfare. And that gamification had a quite twisted side. Of course, there is a distance between the soldier and the battlefield, which protects the soldier. The less blood the more technological you are, less blood you have. But at the same time, you don't feel the war. And not feeling the war, you can create easily collateral damages, and you cannot control the collateral damages, because there is a sociological and psychological aspect of warfare. And they need to accompany the victimization, the collateral damages, and so on.
Yeah,
and
so that's part of very special training. It's not like...
Sorry?
That's part of very special training. I mean...
Yes, also. But right now you have problems with some officers and some soldiers, some military that conduct drones. And so I don't know where warfare is going, which type of soldiers we will have, but I know two things. The more technological you are, sometimes the less sophisticated will be the attacks, because it's an asset to be unsophisticated, because you cannot control, because it's easy. But at the same time, they explore social media and they explore cyberspace. Remember the so-called Stab Intifada in Israel. Stab Intifada was an appeal made by Hamas to use any kind of object to kill and to stab an Israeli or a Jew. And so it was an open source thing in Surface Web with Facebook, so how to stab an Israeli. And so this has a huge impact. But the Israeli government blocked that. And so the more technological you are, the less sophisticated will be the attacks. But at the same time, warfare is changing and you create different type of soldiers, different type of military, which are not prepared for certain types of warfare and can create more unsophisticated wars, more insurgent. Let me just finish. And even though the ethical perspective of warfare, there was an author called Christopher Cocker, he wrote about it in a book quite interesting. It's Waging War Without Warriors.
No, I mean, my takeaway from what you said in that sense, that our future education will be less and less technological, in a sense that we will learn less and less how to do very specific technological things, but more general mindset training, etc. In a sense that technology will be there to back us up. There obviously will be ICT still, but we will learn not even how to use it, but why to use it.
Think about it. Not be in technology, but think about technology. Maybe, I hope so. It's not a sort of became or just focus more on a so-called analogical education, but probably, let's hope so, to have a reflexive perspective on technology, not to be totally immersed on technology, because if you are immersed, you don't have capability of reflection. Okay. I hope so.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have to dismiss this panel. Now, before I do, one last thing. Now, can you recommend each one of you a book, a link, or something to visit, to follow, etc. So maybe you can recommend some literature or something for our viewers.
Okay. I don't have a personal link, but I can recommend lots of literature about this situation. I said Christopher Cocker wrote quite interesting books about changing the character of war, and so if you are interested, of course, from a philosophical or from a theoretical perspective, he's not an IT guy, he's not a tech, he's not a practitioner, he's a professor from LSE. So I seriously advise you, if you want a different perspective on the impacts of technology on warfare.
Okay, good one. Now, Richard, may I joke so you can recommend Tom Clancy? Or no, I'm kidding.
I just, I'm thinking of my own personal journey of reading those kind of books, and there's lots that I'd recommend, but I'll just have to stay tactical again.
Yeah.
Mark earlier today talked about the IBM's X-Force Exchange site, which is a great resource for people to learn more. We also maintain another site called securityintelligence.com, which is a great resource for just learning about the state of the industry and the state of the security problem. So I'm going to stick with that this time.
Okay, good on. Thank you. Katrin?
I'll be even more general. I won't recommend any specific books, but I would recommend people to read philosophy.
Okay.
Actually, because there are so many ethical issues that I think are the ones that will unite whichever aspect we come from. And I think the best thing of that is actually to go back to philosophers, whether to go back to the really ancient ones, but we could go to say, philosophers of the last century or so, and that would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's give a warm applause to our panelists. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, good one.